Test. Mike. I don't think any
Hello? Okay. So I guess I'll get started.
Good afternoon. We will get started here. It is 4:04, and this is our Gadsden ISD Budget Workshop. Ms. Martinez.
Okay. Yes, thank you everyone for being here today. We will begin. The purpose of this presentation is to go over our operational budget for the upcoming school year. So when planning the budget, there are key factors that we must consider. One of them being the alignment of the budget to the district priorities. Oops. Okay, we had a... Just click on your presentation. Okay, there we go. One of them being the alignment of budget to district priorities. And this is to ensure we accomplish the objectives set forth in the strategic plan. Second is staffing. So one of the things we do during the budget season is we hold several meetings. And we collaborate closely with finance, the Office of Superintendent, principals, human resource, and department heads. And we review enrollment trends, projections, and staffing models, and student needs. And we make staffing decisions that support students and ensures a wise use of our human resources. The other thing is evaluation of department needs. So we do meet with departments, and we review staffing patterns. We talk about the needs of the departments and other costs. We talk about the increase in cost, some of the fixed cost, and some of our one-time expenditures. And so we meet and we make decisions on budgets based on that. The next thing is the availability of funds. So what resources are available to the district? So we have some funds that have been given planning allocations or planning awards. That's Title I, Title II, and Title III. But there are other funds for which we don't know, as of today, we don't know what those allocations were. And that's Carl Perkins and IDEA B. In fact, actually, IDEA B, we received our award this morning. But this is late in the budgeting process, and so it makes it difficult to plan for those, to plan when you don't have all of the budget resources available. The next thing is rising operational costs. So we've all witnessed an increase in the cost of goods and services. So, and then you have the uncertainty in federal funding. So there has been some changes at the federal level, and we don't know at this point what funding will be available. So you do have some funds like Medicaid, SMP, and Title III that we may not receive the same funding we have been receiving. And so there is a concern there. And a lot of these funds have positions tied to them. So we need to plan accordingly, right? The next thing is unfunded mandates, which is doing more with the same amount of money. And then we have declining student enrollment, which affects our main source of revenue, which is the SCG. So what we have next is a visual of our 10-year average of the 80th and 120th memberships. And so you can see here that there is a decline in enrollment. If you look at the last 5 years, the average decline in enrollment has been 286 students. So that is about the size of one of our elementary schools. And that has been year after year. And if you look at the last bar, which is a purple bar, you see that the average membership is 11,251. That is the number that's going to be used for this year's budget. So just really quickly, in this slide, I want to go ahead and read talk about or refresh the SCG formula. So I'm going to read this, and it says this SCG funds schools, the SCG funds schools districts based on last year's student enrollment counts from the 180th and 120th days of school. Adjustments are made for factors like grade level, special education, bilingual programs, and at-risk students. These adjusted counts, called program units, are multiplied by a dollar amount, unit value, set by the legislator to determine each district's total funding. And the reason I bring that up is because what you have here is Gadsden's state equalization guarantee. And so we have the different programs. So you have basic education units, special education, at risk, and then you have the units that were generated by these programs, and you have the unit value. And when you multiply the units times the unit value, you get your program cost. The unit value is set twice a year, so you have your initial unit value and you have your final unit value. The unit value we have right now, the 6,801.35, is the initial unit value. And so that was set it's usually set around April of 2025, so it was set this year, and it'll be set again by the legislator sometime in February. And that unit value could go up or come down or stay the same, and so that affects our SCG dollars. And so if you look at basic education units, what you have there is that's where the bulk is. Over 50% of our program costs are generated through basic education units. And this is your student counts multiplied by your grade level factors. And so now that we've talked about the SCG, I want to go into what New Mexico requires is a balanced budget. And so what this is we want to make sure that the resources of the district, and the resources are the revenues and the cash, and there's, on the other hand, you have the district needs or the district priorities, which are the expenditures and cash reserves. And those two need to balance each other. So usually for every resource we have, say you have $100 in resources, and you need a budget for $100. And so we will talk about the district's resources first. And so these are revenues and cash. So the projected operational revenues are, first you have your SCG, which is 99.28% of the revenues for the district. And you can see we have $179 million. Then you have district activity fees. And so these fees are usually Chromebooks or, lost and stolen books. Then you have your revenue from local sources, which is rents and use of building. You have indirect cost, which the indirect cost this year is 4.88%, and this is the administrative fee to state and federal grants. And then you have the sale of property, which is when we have those auction sales of school property, E-rate and interest income. So overall, our projected revenues are $180 million. Then we have our cash. A school district's cash balance or carryover is the amount of money a district has on hand at the end of the fiscal school year, which is June 30th. And so what typically happens is around March, we have some deadlines we've established, and what we request is that, what we look at when we're trying to project cash balances, we look at encumbrances and we look at spending trends. And what we try to do is we set deadlines and we say, okay, make sure you close out any purchase orders that you're no longer going to use. And so that changes our encumbrances, and our encumbrances help us do this. And so this year, we've set our projected cash balance at $61 million. And so that is, so in summary, you have revenues of $180 million and cash of $61 million. And so our total available resources are $242 million. And so to balance the budget, we need to assign those resources to district needs or district priorities. And so then you have, so these are usually in the form of expenditures and cash reserves. One of our biggest expenditures, and it's actually 89.33% of our SCG, is our employee wages and salaries benefits. So we do have $155.8 million, and you can see there that we've have budgeted 1,761 positions. And you can see the breakdown here by function of where the budget lies and how many positions per function. Now, some of the changes that were made to employee compensation and benefits was there is a 4% increase to all school personnel. There was no changes to ERB, RHCA, vision, or disability. There was an increase to medical insurance premiums for high, low, and EPO options, which was 9.95%. There was an increase to dental insurance, which is 4%. And there is also in the budget is a SPED stipend for teachers. Something that's different this year is in the past, our percentage of dollars tied to salaries and benefits was in the 92-93 range, and that was because included in that were substitutes. Substitutes were part of our employees. This year, we're making a shift, and substitutes are being outsourced to EduStaff. So that is why you see that number kind of trickle down to 89%. And so that's also a change that's happened this year, and that is, our substitute positions will be outsourced through EduStaff. So that is our salaries. Now, there are department budgets and other budgets. So some of them are, we have $12 million in administration and other support. There's construction costs, they're $17.3 million, and that is a Gadsden Middle School. We have $2.1 million in instructional materials. Stipends, increments, and other compensations are $4.2, and technology, $5 million. So in total, we have $61.9 million. Cash reserves. So as I mentioned earlier, there are some uncertainties on what may happen to budgets, specifically federal funds that we don't have too much information about. And so with that, I am making the recommendation that we hold on reserves 10% of our total budget, which would be about $24,250,000 on cash reserves. So when you add this up, you have $156 million in salaries and benefits, $61 million in department budgets and other budgets, and then you have $24.2 million in cash reserves, and you have total district expenditures plus reserves of $242 million. And so then we have a balanced budget where our resources equal our district needs. The other thing we have here is other preliminary budget allocations. So we have received some allocations and planning awards, like I mentioned earlier. So we have a Title I, but there are some that we're still waiting on, and I just wanted to put this information in here. Our IDEA B just came in, and we had estimated it would come in at 3.4. It actually came in a little higher at 3.5. And at this point, I'd like to entertain any questions you may have.
So thank you for your presentation, Ms. Martinez. I do have a question. In this year's projected budget, how, and a question for Mr. Dempsey, is when it regards to SROs or even security for our unincorporated areas such as Chaparral, such as the North Valley area, the northern part of Gadsden, what is the plan?
Ms. Martinez, do you remember the staffing lines of security?
So I do recall Mr. Ortega saying that there was going to be an MOU with the city of Anthony and Sunland Park, but I don't remember him mentioning anything about the Chaparral area.
Okay, so with that in mind, Mr. Dempsey, does this district have a plan as far as, because, I mean, you don't have to explain, I know the whole situation with the SROs and the sheriff, but is there any plans to hire more security or for those areas?
Okay, Ms. Flores, what I would say is, at the mid-year point, I believe we brought on 3 FTEs, and don't quote me on that number, but I think it was 3 FTEs mid-year. And we are trying to work with, we were notified about a month ago that the city of Anthony would be able and interested to consider use of their officers. So it seemed like there had been maybe a conversation between our current sheriff and the chief of police of Anthony that some allowance would be made. We shared a copy of the current MOU, and I haven't heard back. Now, what I would say is that if we're able to secure those SROs, that's going to allow us to change our staffing model of our security department, which could increase in areas that may not have SROs.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Three of my colleagues are online, so I don't know if they can speak. I don't know how they're online.
Well, and I wanted to say Madam President, Madam Former President. Unfortunately, we were not aware anyone was going to be online. So what I've provided them is the streaming link. And so they wouldn't be able to then speak to us directly. They could, I believe, post, because it's YouTube, so they could post something in the chat on YouTube, and we could then review that way.
Could they text me or no? I don't know.
Madam President, we're not in a formal meeting, so I think a text is just fine. I don't think that's a problem.
So the 3 of you that are listening, if you have any questions, there's questions? Okay, so if you guys are listening to me, if you have any questions, put them on the chat, or you could text me since it's not a formal meeting. Let me see. Okay.
And Ms. Martinez, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe in the upcoming regular board meeting, you'll be able to present the preliminary operational budget.
That is correct.
That's a great opportunity then, and I would encourage board members, if you have questions, get those to us early so that we're have those specific lines ready to discuss those with you or talk to you about very specifics. And then it'll come back for final approval probably June
12th board.
June 12th meeting. So we get a little bit more time with the specific operational.
Okay. And then what is the process as far as salary schedules within here? Do y'all talk with the union and come to an agreement, or how does that work?
Union has reviewed salary schedules and approved.
Yes.
Okay. And then what else I had? As far as salary schedules, did anybody get other than the 4%? Nobody else got any other type of raises?
No, it would be the 4%, but there is some SPED teacher stipends that were budgeted this year that are new.
Okay. Yeah, and I saw that earlier on your presentation. So is that a local decision, or is that being funded through some other sources? Or is that a local decision to provide our special education teachers with that stipend? And is that all special ed teachers, or who is receiving this?
I don't know if it's all SPED teachers. Maria, do you know? But it is being funded with operational dollars, and it is a local decision. It is all SPED teachers. Okay, she's telling me it is all SPED teachers.
And if I may ask, what is the stipend amount?
They're different. We have a $1,500 stipend and a $3,000 stipend.
And why the difference?
The units, the level of units, Ms.
Board Member Flores, my understanding, I don't have the Associate Superintendent for Special Ed, it's regarding the amount of work in the unit, like a DSC unit would get like a $3,000, and like a resource teacher would get the $1,500. And that was determined by the Special Ed Department.
Okay. And when you said operational, is that coming from special ed money or?
It is coming from the operational budget. So the district's budget, it is under the 05, so it would be part of the payroll. It's part of our payroll process.
Okay, and then I'm gonna go back to the 15.
What do you mean by special ed money?
So I guess, and correct me if, is it
Yes,
coming
I'm
from
sorry.
like the special ed department or? I guess explain to me.
Right, so you have two funding sources. So you have your IDEA B money and you have operational money. This stipends are coming from the operational fund.
And then going back to the, let me see, the 1,500 versus the 3,000, is that, so like say that I'm a case manager, so it all depends on the, when you say unit, can you elaborate specifically, Ms. Hernandez?
I'll try. I'm not sure if I can do justice for it, but like in our district, and I'm sure in New Mexico, we have like inclusion, right? We have a resource unit, we have an ASC unit, we have LSC units, DSC units, behavior units. And so, again, I don't want to misspeak regarding the special education piece when they discussed that piece, but it was really determined by the amount of the needs of the classroom, right? And so that's how that was determined, and also funding had a lot to do with it. Our IDEA B budget is not being used for this, but it was cut something like $300,000. So I know that that is something that has been close to your heart about at least providing some kind of support for those teachers. So at this time, that's what I can recall from it, but I think that if there was more questions during the board meeting in regards to that piece, I'm sure Ms. Angelica Rodriguez would be able to handle it a little bit better than I can.
Okay, yeah, so definitely if you can communicate to Ms. Rodriguez.
Okay.
That if she can do a presentation of how that was decided and like, because I guess the only other question is, it's either going to be like 1,500 or 3,000, nothing in between.
No, nothing in between.
Okay, yeah, if she can provide that information, I'd really appreciate it.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you.
Mr. Hector, are there any other questions over there? No? Let me see.
Can I
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not sure if part of the, and I'll talk to Ms. Rodriguez and her team about this piece. It's kind of what we do with the bilingual stipends, where bilingual endorsed teachers get a little bit higher than our TESOL. And I think that was kind of the part of the mentality, but I will make sure that they clarify exactly why they did that piece. Okay.
So TESOL gets stipends too? Yes. Oh, really?
If they're in the programs.
If they're actually teaching like a dual language or a
Right, if they're the English component or if they are in an ELD classroom. And again, that's, I don't know if Ms. Tarazona's here, but that's tied to the hours that students get. Because sometimes we have people who say, well, I teach students, but they don't meet the criteria for the state, which is the 3 hours. Is that correct, Ms. Tarazona?
Good afternoon, Ms. Flores. So we have two types of stipends in bilingual. We have the bilingual stipend. As you're aware, you helped us increase it to $3,500, and it was $1,500. And then the TESOL went from $1,000 to $200, and it's based on levels of service. So depending whether they're in a dual language, self-contained or partner, but they both get a stipend.
So you said it went from 1,000 to 200?
It went from 1,500 bilingual to 3,500. And it's been 2 years, I believe, and then it went from 1,000 to 2,000.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
And actually, she did a better job explaining that piece, Ms. Flores, in regards to the special ed. I think it is tied to the levels of service, so that makes more sense to me now. Okay?
Okay. And then I guess probably this would be for the next time, for our next board meeting. This is more directed to Mr. Dempsey. It's like when we go to these trainings, conventions, you know how they always say, you know, your budget has to be aligned with the strategic plan. And so I would love to see something that shows the community and us board members how this year's upcoming budget is aligned to our strategic plan.
Madam, Ms. Flores, I think Chief Hernandez can speak to that. You're going to find a requirement within our budgets called the ED plan, and that was just submitted, which ties directly to.
Yeah, thank you for that question. In fact, we just brought that up, Board Member Flores, in regards to the strategic plan. I believe you all met last semester in Taos, was that last year, Mr. Dempsey, with the CES when you were at the what is it, a conference? And so the goals were brought to us. We've been developing them, and in fact, those will be presented to you in the June meeting for the next school year. But we just submitted the New Mexico Ed Plan that is required, and so everything has to be tied to the budget as well. So if it's okay with you, when we present you the strategic goals, I'd like to be able to present the Ed Plan once it's approved, and then we can show where all the alignment comes in there. And I think one of them, in fact, was like a security question that you all had as a goal. We were not part of the strategic plan this year in regards to input, but we had your 4 goals, I believe.
So would that presentation be prior to us approving the budget or after? Because I would want to see it, I mean, I personally would want to see that before I vote, you know, give my personal vote.
Oh,
to
yeah,
approve or
we
not
could
to
do it.
approve.
We could at least do the draft before, if you'd be more comfortable with that.
Yes, ma'am.
If you recall, we did have the community meetings, and then they had their priorities, and I'm assuming those were what you all used to create your goals, and then we can discuss that further in a discussion item, Mr. Dempsey. I don't know. So that would have to be this next board meeting, no? Because our next one would be in June. And
What I would, yeah, and thank you, Chief Hernandez. What I would say to that is, I would, well, the requirement that's in the budget is the Ed Plan. And I would focus, you know, those set a lot of the academic priorities and make sure there's budget for those. If I'm being really honest, it'd be very difficult, in my opinion, to get a finalized strategic plan in place before the budget. I think that would be pretty near impossible to do. But I think immediately following, and the Ed Plan will give you, I think, the majority of the academic guidance, if you will, which at the end of the day ties to staffing, ties to salary schedules, is the bulk of the work. And then you could really then adjust a strategic plan for other items as the board might feel they
And
need
the
to.
only reason is like, I'm speaking myself, not for the board, is when I go to these things, I'm like, okay, I've been curious, okay. So we're learning that it's got to be tied to a strategic plan, but how do you all present that to us in order to, in other words, that I'm assured that that is in fact not just saying it. Does that make sense? Right. I don't know how, I mean, nobody in these trainings has said, this is what it looks like, to make sure, I guess, so that there's accountability. Does that make sense?
Board Member Flores, if you recall, throughout the other strategic plan that we just are finishing up, that we completed, that we did like 3 or 4 years ago, we did some updates to the board several times. So I think that that's kind of an accountability piece. What I can say for the strategic plan that's finishing off now, we really have completed it and exceeded in it, because if you recall last year, we didn't have any schools in designation, our EL student numbers have, our access scores went up, our special ed group is out of designation. So the accountability piece can be what we kind of have done and give you like an update every quarter of where we are in the strategic plan, if that's something that you're looking for. Or we could do it more times, if you like it twice, once a month, or whatever the board feels or deems that we would be able to be held accountable in regards to what we're doing with the strategic plan and the Ed Plan. We're willing to do as a team, whatever makes you guys comfortable. Absolutely. We want to
And
make
then-
sure.
And then I'm just going to be transparent. I mean, so I guess maybe, yes, quarterly updates. And then I was going to reach out, I don't know, to one of these presenters and ask them, like, how does that look on paper? How does that look? Just to make sure. Okay.
Perfect. And when we do, Board Member Flores, when we do present to you, I'll be happy to give you the actual copy of how we monitor it. But absolutely, we'll do whatever the board feels comfortable in regards to holding us accountable and making sure that we're making progress toward those goals.
Okay. If my colleagues, Mr. Hector, any more questions on the chat? No? Let me double check here. I actually don't, at this time, don't have any questions, but if I do come up with anything else, I'll reach out to Mr. Dempsey and to Ms. Ladim. So-
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Flores, for your time. I appreciate everybody that presented. Ms. Martinez, thank you and your team for your work. And let's all have a great weekend. It'll all get started next week, and it'll go fast and furious. Thank you.
Thank you.